Hello and welcome to the Entrepreneurial Summit. I'm Mahesh Thakur, VP of Product Management at GoDaddy. Today I'm here to share 3 success mantras of mine. And I'm going to share with you a story and how I learned these mantras. This story is about my grandparents. This is in 1947 when India was going through a partition as a country. It was a tough time in the history of the country. My grandparents were all settled and living with their 3 kids in their own homeland. My grandfather worked tirelessly to build his business. He had a store, he had a factory, and they had a nice home there. As a result of the riots that happened during the partition, his store and his factory all got burned down. He couldn't speak a word while that was happening in front of his own eyes. This was because if he did, he would be identified as a person from the minority religion and they would all get killed. In that moment, they had to make a decision to leave everything behind and flee so that they can be alive. In that moment, they arrived at the train station. When they arrived there were other hundreds of thousands of people trying to flee. Every train that came was full of people who were trying to flee. The next 3 days, they camped there with their 3-year-old, with their 2-year-old, and a 1-month-old infant. Food and water was scarce and was hardly distributed. Throughout the 3 days, they neither got any food or any water. During that time, they felt that if they made it alive out of this situation, they would always give their family and their kids a nice life. And that's what my grandparents did. Growing up, my grandfather shared how these mantras helped him shape his life. They finally boarded the train that would now come to Bombay, which is now called Mumbai, India. When they arrived here in Bombay in 1947, they would now become refugees in their own country. It was an extremely difficult time for them. The 3 mantras are: number 1, to be reborn. My grandfather shared with me that when he arrived here, he had nothing. He had to start from scratch. At that point, they as a family decided to forgive and forget everything that had happened to them in the past. They had nobody else to blame. They did not want to think about the past or the luxuries they used to enjoy. They decided to give everything a fresh, new start. They had an all-new level of energy, an all-new level of commitment to give themselves and their kids a wonderful life. So being reborn was an important part of how he shaped his mindset and the work that he did. The second principle and the second mantra that my grandfather shared with me was to rebuild. My grandfather had an extraordinary character. In addition to that, he also had a good fluency in English. This was due to his earlier experiences in life. As a result of that, he began trading or selling knickknacks to the affluent in the Bombay area. He wanted to do everything he could to jumpstart his business and then slowly start to make it profitable. It was something that he enjoyed doing and he persevered. He worked tirelessly to rebuild and restart everything for their family. The third mantra that he shared with me was to renew. My grandfather established the knickknacks business, but he and my grandmother both knew this would not give them the kind of life they would want for their kids growing up. So they started to take some risks and venture into launching their own business of making handbags. My grandfather learned the skills of actually making modern women's handbags. He purchased the leather, the chain, all the raw materials to finally create the designs and see if customers liked it. He actually validated a lot of his hypotheses by actually testing out what he was building and seeing if customers would like it. Over 10 handmade designs failed, and he finally launched into having something which really was resonating very well with his target customers. And at that point, they started to put a factory together. He did everything he could to borrow the money, to help scale it one step at a time and bringing like-minded people along in the journey. He also got to know and brought along in the journey an expert who would help them set up a factory. At the peak, my grandfather had 8 people working for him and they scaled the business. Here's a funny incident. No matter what happened, no matter how hard my grandfather worked, the business was still not profitable. And that was also something that my grandmother constantly complained about. One fine day, my grandfather says to my grandma, I'm now promoting you to Munim Ji. You are now officially the accountant of the business. And at that point, my grandmother took this very seriously. She actually committed her time and her energy to figure out the whole invoicing system, which technically was paper chits being given to the buyers, and they would put their date, their signature, and the amount of when they would give the money to my grandfather, who was a seller of these handbags. My grandmother developed the system and tracked down every single invoice, the payment, and the date by which the money needs to come in. And with her commitment, she actually turned the business profitable. This was a huge milestone in their life, in their business, and from there, they knew that scaling would only lead to more profits. It is a great inspiration for me even today, because with that, they were now able to finally afford great education and a good life for all their 5 children. Even today, my grandfather's mantras inspire me. In my own journey, I have had the opportunity to work at Microsoft, Amazon, Intuit, and now GoDaddy. I've also been a successful entrepreneur and a small business owner. I also work with a lot of startups and small businesses. In my journey, I have had the opportunity to learn and apply these 3 mantras of success that my grandfather shared with me. Number 1, the principle of being reborn, or the mantra of being reborn. I have had the honor and I've been humbled by the opportunity to work with Amazon and Microsoft. But when I went and started my own company, I realized I had to learn everything from scratch and do a lot of things myself. I had to do the marketing, I had to do fundraising. During that time, I definitely reached out to a lot of folks for raising funds as well. The very same people who would take my calls when I was at Microsoft would now not even recognize my number. It was a very humbling experience for me. And that's when I realized this was a time when I had to be reborn with all new skills, all new energy. I had to let go all the thoughts that I had about the past, about having the access and the privileges, and remind myself that this is a time I have to rebuild and I have to restart everything from scratch. The second mantra is to rebuild. And at that point, I basically had the opportunity to really step back and think, how should I scale my startup? How should I approach new customers? I really had learned in the Microsoft and Amazon world, how do you go about testing out ideas without investing all the capital you have, without investing all the resources you have? So with limited resources, how do you take an idea or how do you take a hypothesis and go test it out with your target customers before you go full scale on something? And I took that principle, I took that approach and applied that in my startup. I tested some ideas, I validated the approaches, and then started to invest in the ones that were actually showing the signs of success or showing some validation from customers. And I could do that systematically. I could apply the principles of testing and validation and experimentation to be able to validate what my customers in a startup wanted. And that approach helped me launch my app, my product in 80 countries across the world, get amazing customers to try them and to adopt those products. And I also forged new partnerships, new relationships that will help the company generate revenue and ultimately turn profitable. The third mantra that I applied was to renew. This is something which I've done this all my life. Every time I took a job or took a different job, I've had to renew my approach. Renewal needs you to really renew both your mindset, your knowledge, and obviously the technology, the platform that you're using or applying at any point in time. I've worked as an engineer, I've been a product manager, I've been an entrepreneur, I've led teams. But throughout this phase, throughout my journey, throughout my career, throughout my life, I've had the opportunity to renew my mindset, because no matter what stage you are, no matter if you're early stage, late stage, mid stage, you really have to keep renewing yourself. You have to renew your knowledge, you have to renew your mindset, and finally, if you're using technology for yourself, for your business, you have to keep renewing and keep using the new methods, the new ideas, the new technologies that you can then use to fast track your idea or your business. I have taken a lot of inspiration from my grandfather's mantras, from his strength, and from his fortitude. I have developed 3 attributes in my own career and journey. Number 1, being comfortable with the unknown. When I have had my own startup, when I've been in roles in the corporate world, I've figured that I may not have all the answers, and it's okay. But what's important is to get started, and sometimes you figure things out along the way. The second attribute that I've built is to see possibility. Seeing possibility is a skill that I've developed because I've spent time understanding what the customer's problems are, what their needs are, what is it that they need today, what is it that they may need 2-3 years out, and being able to build towards that. Having that vision, having that idea gives you that detail that you need to see the possibility and also bring others along in the journey so that you can share that idea, that possibility with them. The third attribute that I've built is actually of continuous learning. Over a period of time, I've realized that one can always overestimate what you can do in a day, but underestimate what you can do in the months and years to come. And for that, the number one thing that will become important is how fast you can learn. How fast you can learn about your customers, about the business trends, about technology, and then bring that back and apply that to your everyday business, to your everyday lives. Hence, continuous learning is a third attribute that I've built, and I think it's something where I would consider myself a lifelong learner. We at GoDaddy understand what it takes to run a small business. We get small businesses. We work with 20 million plus small businesses every single day. Your story inspires us to come to work every day to build the world-class products, experiences, and technologies for small businesses. Remember, if you're a refugee or an immigrant or a small business owner, small businesses actually create and contribute to 20% plus towards the economy every single year. You're a critical part of the nation and the society. Your story inspires me. Your story inspires all of us at GoDaddy. And I bet you know someone in your life who inspires you today to be reborn, to rebuild, and to renew. Thank you.